So as I'm sure everyone knows, there are certain sayings that come from the Gospels that have sort of made their way into popular culture and common language. The blind leading the blind, casting the first stone, go the extra mile, the signs of the times, to wash your hands of the matter. All of these common phrases in English come from the Gospels and Gospel stories. And of course we have today's Gospel, the Good Samaritan. Usually we hear the phrase Good Samaritan on the evening news when there's a car accident or someone gets injured and people come to help. And the news panel behind the reporter says Good Samaritan. And when I see that, part of me likes it because I think it's a nod towards Jesus in this story. But another part of me thinks that all of those passages from the Gospels, somehow we've forgotten the power and the deeper message that they hold because they've just become part of our common vocabulary. This story today, I think we have to look at because it is so familiar. We have to look at the beginning of the Gospel to understand it, how it's framed out. Why is Jesus telling this story? A question is asked. How do I gain life? But who asked the question? Who asked the question about life? What was his profession? He was a lawyer. Jesus responds, what does it say in the law? Jesus meets him where he's at, gives him the answer in a way that he will understand. But the answer given was one that was centered on love, not on law. And I think that surprised Jesus. That's why Jesus says, you have given the right answer. Do this and you will live. But I think that Jesus sees this man as ready for more. He's ready to rise higher than just the law. So he tells this parable. Why does the priest walk to the other side of the road? Why does the Levite walk to the other side of the road? Ritual purity. A very, very serious matter in the life of an observant Jew. The Gospel says that the man on the road was left half beaten to death. So he was probably on the side of the road, unconscious, not moving, covered in blood, half naked. He probably looked to the priest and the Levite as if he were dead. Understanding ritual law means understanding that there is a serious prohibition for an observant Jew to never, ever touch the body of a corpse. According to the book of Numbers, it says, the one who touches the corpse of any person shall be unclean for 7 days. Anyone who touches the corpse, the body of a man who has died, and does not purify himself, that person shall be cut off from Israel. This is serious stuff. So for 7 days, you can't be around anybody. And the ritual purification is very, very detailed. And if you mess up one step, you have to start all over again. You are essentially isolated for those 7 days. Because anybody you touch, or who accidentally touches you, is now also impure. In the hierarchy of impurity, touching a dead body was at the top, more than anything else. So, to go to the other side of the road from a legal perspective made sense. It made perfect sense why we would ignore this person. And I'm sure that as they walked on, they offered prayers for him. I'm sure that they prayed to God that he would be okay, that someone would help him, that he would be forgiven his sins. But the real truth is that why they walked to the other side of the road doesn't really matter that much. What matters is that they did it. What matters is that this bruised, suffering, probably dying man was less important than ritual law. The fact that he was a beautiful and irreplaceable person because he was human was ignored and stripped away. What matters is that he was seen as less than, as unimportant and insignificant despite his humanity. His humanity was ignored because of the law. Human, man-made law placed on the lips of God. People do this all the time. We create officially or in our own minds what we say are unchangeable, unbreakable, undiscussable laws that we base our own righteousness on, paying no mind to the people that are left out because of those laws. They are not allowed to love, or to enter, or to live, or to work because of our human-made laws. So how do we figure out which laws are of God and which are the ones we have made up and sometimes placed on the lips of God? The answer is in the gospel today. Does it uphold love? Is it based on human dignity and respect for human life? The answer is yes, then it's of God. If no, then it's our law. And then Jesus introduces this man in the scriptures, the Samaritan. As all of us already know, that observant Jews and Samaritans have little respect for each other. Samaritans who were in fact Jewish were considered third or fourth class Jews. So the one who was not supposed to see him as worthy, the one that was supposed to ignore and walk past, in fact teaches the lesson that Jesus wants to show. That law, religious law, political law, yes, dare I even say it, even biblical teachings that fly in the face of love are in fact wrong. The lesson is that we are all our brothers and sisters' keeper. That the one we dismiss as less is in fact as sacred as our own child, our parent, our spouse. You see, the sin of the Levite and the priest in the story was to dehumanize another person, to look past a human being in favor of law, supposedly divine law. What Jesus is trying to teach in this gospel is that to be his followers means we must hear and see as God does. And that takes some doing for all of us because we are people. We are flawed, sinful people, but lifted up in faith. We are prone to pride and ego and left to ourselves, but if we bring ourselves to Christ, we rise above them. You see, the same beauty that you saw in your children the first time they took a step, the first time as an infant they grabbed your finger and squeezed it, the love you feel for them when they sit and curl in your lap before bed, that is the love that God feels for all people, that we see as different and we see as other, the ones we see as outside because of barriers we put up. The sin of dehumanizing is a problem throughout our world, and no one has an exclusive domain on this. There are pastors who dehumanize. Those who are called to be shepherds of people are often those who strip others of their beauty and value. It is our sin also. Some teachers and protesters dehumanize. Some police dehumanize. Doctors and lawyers and construction workers dehumanize others. The white community, the black and brown and Asian community dehumanize others not like them and see them as other, outside. Christians and Muslims and Jews often see others not like them as less than and less important. It is our universal sin. Just this week, in a 7-day time period, there is story after story of how we dehumanize each other. In Missoula, Montana, a woman named Tanya Gersh 2 years ago had a dispute with the mother of a neo-Nazi, and because of that, her name was published on this neo-Nazi website. Tanya Gersh is in fact Jewish. And she began to receive the most horrible, awful messages online and on her voicemail that I can't even repeat. Harassed for 2 years, finally bringing this to court. But she said, in some way, this broke her. Being tormented by white nationalists because she is Jewish. 2 women this week in a Florida Burger King telling the manager to go back to Mexico because he was speaking Spanish to one of his co-workers. Police officers in Tempe, Arizona asked to leave a Starbucks. Why? Because they were police officers in uniform. Because people can't see the human being behind the walls we create in our own mind. We see others as less than. 2 weeks ago at the Pride March, 2 of our bishops, our incoming bishop, Paul Hagensteiner, and our presiding bishop, Elizabeth Eaton, were holding up signs saying, "This bishop loves you." The young man came up to Bishop Hagensteiner and shook his hand and said something to him that he couldn't quite make out at first. So he said, "I didn't catch that, could you repeat that?" And he said, "You mean I'm not going to hell?" And he was dead serious. And he was stunned, and he asked him to say it again, and he said, "No, of course you aren't. You are loved by God." And it moved this young man so much that he gave Bishop Hagensteiner a hug. And he told him as he left again, God loves you as his child. There are people that walk around with this terrible sense of worthlessness because other people place it on them because they see them as other and justify it with law. Who is my neighbor? Often it is the one who we think is least likely. The one who I expect to reject and hurt is the one who just may save me. On any given day, this Samaritan in the story, the man who was injured, may have walked past each other and ignored each other purposely. Maybe sneered or thrown an unkind word. But seeing this man in pain and vulnerable brought out his humanity. As a Samaritan, he wasn't supposed to stop, but he did. Reading today says the Samaritan was moved with pity at the sight of this man. Many translations of the Bible say not pity, but compassion. For the Samaritan, this Jewish man was no longer other, was no longer separate, but one with him. That is the heart of compassion. Seeing this person, these people that seem so different from me, is the same as me. Seeing all people as neighbor, as Jesus commands, means seeing them as you see yourself. It is compassion, not law, that Jesus Christ commands us to. Do this, and you will live.